I think on my last video I mentioned that I do this putting videos on YouTube. That is for the reason of providing myself some motivation to go out flying. And today was a perfect example of that. I have an extremely busy weekend. And probably would not have gone out flying today. I probably would have taken the opportunity to sleep in a little bit and maybe relax some, but boy, the weather is so good today. Blue skies, absolutely no wind. Just a little bit of patchy ground fog here and there, but no big deal. But anyway, yeah, I'm out of videos. That was my last one. I actually have one more that I haven't edited yet, but anyway, if I want to keep my commitment of one video per week, I need to get out there and make one. And the weather was so nice today, man, I couldn't pass it up. And as I got to the airport, man, I was quite happy and quite excited to be out flying. So do a run up here and then we'll get in the air and we'll head to Bay City. I was thinking today of doing something a little different, which is just shut up and play some music while flying, but the visibility is not so good for that today. So I'll tell another long-winded story. Once again, don't like the story, you can feel free to mute and try and enjoy the hazy pictures. Anyway, I thought about talking about my time as an airline pilot. So it's going to be a long, complicated story. It may have to be broken into two parts. There are a lot of different aspects to it and a lot of moving parts. So now, in order to talk about anything regarding the airlines, I think the first thing you have to understand...
7 Niner Juliet Sierra, contact approach 126.45. See you later.
...is the seniority system. Pretty much every airline has a seniority system.
November 4 Niner Juliet Sierra, contact approach 126.45.
And the seniority system
126.45,
is what is used to determine pretty much everything as far as pilots go. When you get promotions, when you get... change from the right seat to the left seat, how you pick your schedule, how you get vacation, what bases you can pick. Pretty much everything is based on a seniority order. And the seniority is set by your hire date and your class date, basically when you start training. For all the pilots that are hired in the same new hire class, who start in the same new hire class, the seniority within the class is determined typically by birthday, which means the oldest pilot has more seniority than younger pilots. So as I said, seniority sets everything. So like for example, when you're picking your schedule, they publish a number of schedules for if you're, providing you're not doing pref bid, well, we'll not talk about pref bid for now. If they'll publish, say you have 30 pilots in your base, they'll publish 30 pilots, and the most senior pilot in their seat, meaning a captain or the most senior first officer, they only have to bid for a single schedule because they know they're going to get it. They're the most senior pilot. They'll get whatever they want. And the second pilot in order has to pick 2 schedules. Third pilot has to pick 3 schedules. And for example, if the third pilot,
3562 Gulf, contact
they bid their 3 schedules in preference order, 1, 2, and 3. And if
1, 3, 2, 3, 5,
if
3, 5,
either the number 1 or number 2 pilot picks their number 1 most preferred schedule, they get it. If otherwise, if one of the pilots ahead of them in seniority picks that schedule, then they get, whatever's left over. And the most junior pilot gets basically the scraps of whatever's left over, generally the least desirable things. And as well as your pay is based on your seniority and what seat you sit in. So like if you want to upgrade to captain, well, it goes in seniority. So when a new captain class comes along, they look at the most senior FOs and they offer the captain positions to them. Seniority has its pluses. It's kind of nice in a lot of ways because everything's kind of predictable, but there are also some drawbacks to seniority, and I will give just a little bit of brief description on the drawbacks to the seniority system, just so it's kind of clear. But first, I need to contact Flint Approach. Great Lakes Approach, Mooney 16 Delta Romeo is 15 to the south of Flint at 4,500. I'd like to get flight following to 3 Charlie Mike, and I have Delta.
Mooney 16 Delta Romeo, Great Lakes Approach, block 0444.
0444, Mooney 16 Delta Romeo. So the major drawback of the seniority system is that it is set by your new hire class date for the airline you work for. So for example, you could be a 747 captain for some major airline and through no fault of your own, that airline could go out of business and you'd be out on the street, which means you're looking for a new job. And then you'd apply in another airline. That extremely senior and experienced 747 captain at his new job would go back to the right seat, probably take a pay cut of make about 25 to 30% of the money that he was making and become the most junior guy at the new company. So there's just, little problems like that. So back to my experiences. When in May of 2006, basically the day after my 10-year anniversary at my engineering job, I quit my job there so I could become a full-time flight instructor, so I could build that last little bit of time to become an airline pilot. So I flight instructed for about 5 months, and then in the fall started interviewing for airline positions at regionals. So I wound up taking a job in October 2006 to fly a SOP 340, which is a twin turboprop. I'll post some pictures along the way of what I'm talking about. That's why I got training for a SOP 340, took that airline job, completed training, was based down in Houston Intercontinental, flying for the Continental system as part of one of the major airlines that we flew regional service for. I did that, got my experience, things were going well, got good seniority pretty quickly, started moving up, getting good schedules, and then it came time for me my number came up for upgrading to captain. And right around the time I was upgrading for captain, the major airlines were doing a lot of hiring, and a lot of people that have 6 months to a year more seniority than me that have been captain were all starting to get hired at the majors. So things were looking really good. I mean, that was my goal: get hired on at a major airline, be an airline pilot for the rest of my life, flying for a major. So these friends of mine were all had class dates for major airlines, and things were looking great. And I wound up was commuting down to Houston. Here's another term, by the way, that you need to come learn is commuting. Normal jobs, people talk about commuting means traveling from their house to their job, which may be in a city, next city away or something like that. Well, in the airlines, commuting means you are literally traveling to a completely different city, possibly across the country, by hopping on an airline flight and flying to where your job is located, then do your job. And typically in the airline world, your job is 4 days a week is typical, and each night of those 4 days you spend at a hotel somewhere that's not at your base. So it lends itself well for living not at where your base is, because the company's going to put you up in a hotel anyway. So you commute by heading to your local airport, sign up for a jump seat. It's either sitting in the back or sitting in the cockpit on the jump seat to get a ride to where your base is. Then you pick up your trip. You're flying for 4 days. At the end of it, you walk over to the counter of a flight coming back to your hometown, sign up for that flight, get on, and fly back. Of course, the flights to and from are all free. It's kind of an agreement that all the airlines have with each other that their pilots and flight attendants get to ride for free to get to and from work. So I was commuting back and forth from Detroit to Houston, Texas as a first officer. And while I was doing the commutes, you'd always meet a lot of other pilots. And one of the guys that I met there was a captain for Spirit Airlines. And I got to know him because he was based in Detroit, lived in Houston. I was living in Detroit, based in Houston, so we'd see each other quite a bit. We got to talking. And he got to like me a little bit and said, hey, I could walk your resume into Spirit, and I could get you into Spirit, right away if you wanted. And at the time, I was like, yeah, in retrospect, I should have done it. At the time, I was like, I have my upgrade class date. I'm going to be at Spirit's a good airline to fly for, but I had my sights on Northwest, which is based in Detroit, or Delta, or something of that nature.
Roger that, 5570 Whiskey. I'm about 450. Got it, thanks.
So I turned the guy down, and I accepted my my upgrade class date at the airline I worked for. So I went to captain training, got that all done, got an ATP out of it, got a turbine type rating, which was kind of cool. But unfortunately, while I was in training, right around towards the end of my training, Congress passed a law that changed the mandatory retirement date from 60 to 65. And this is where the seniority system comes in, because what this basically means is that almost everyone in the airline industry is going to be locked in their current seat for 5 years, because generally how people move up in the seniority system is someone at the top moves on. So usually how it works is someone at the majors retires. That moves everyone up a seniority position at that major airline, and that creates an opening at the bottom for a new hire. Those new hires are filled with captains of the regional airlines. So the captain of the regional airline leaves, which moves everyone up at the regionals, which creates an opening as a first officer
0451
at the regional. So because no one was going to be retiring for the next 5 years, everyone was kind of locked in their seat. And since I just finished my upgrade training, I was now a captain, but I was kind of locked into the position of being one of the most junior captains at the airline I work for. And since schedules are picked by the seniority in your position, that means I was going to be the most junior captain almost no matter where I went, getting the worst schedules for the next 5 years, trying to commute. It's easy to commute with good schedules when you have high seniority, because you can pick these schedules and start, say, in the afternoon and finish early enough in the evening, meaning you can get to the airport on the day of your first flight, early in the morning, take a flight to your base. You may be there for 2 hours, you grab lunch, then you join your trip. Then when you get done, there's usually enough time for another flight to get back. So you don't have to stay anywhere in your base that you have to pay for. So they call it a commutable schedule, because you can commute in and out on the same day. Well, as a junior guy, it's almost impossible to get commutable schedules. So here I'm trying to commute, stuck in a really low seniority position as a junior captain. So I started out there. I did bounced around at a few bases, wound back up in, because at that time we had flights for Continental in Houston, we had U.S. Airways out of Pittsburgh, Reagan National, LaGuardia, and Boston, and we had United flights. We flew in the United system out of Washington, Dulles. So I bounced around the Northeast in the U.S. Airways system for a while, ended up back in Houston for a few months, and then some openings at our Dulles base opened up, and that was the most junior base we had, which means because we had to hire some street captains, and since
November 323 saying about just verify.
Since they started with the company after I did, even though they may have been a captain longer than me,
323 saying about that's
I had more seniority than them 060 because I was hired at the company earlier. So I could get out to Dulles, and I could be like kind of roughly in the middle of the range, maybe a little below halfway as a seniority as a captain, so I could get some halfway decent schedules there. So I transferred over to Dulles and flew out of Dulles for a while. Well, after a while, the schedules there started getting worse and worse and worse, and I ended up with enough turbine PIC time to get hired at a major, and I decided I did not want to have horrible schedules trying to commute for the next 4.5 years or 4 years. So I decided I would rather wait it out as a first officer at an airline based in Detroit that I didn't have to commute from. So I started applying to regional airlines based in Detroit.
Let me know when you're on course to wipe them.
And there's another key part of the story here.
November 16 Delta Romeo, contact approach 126.45. See you later.
2645, good day, Mooney 16 Delta Romeo. Great Lakes approach, Mooney 16 Delta Romeo, 4,500 going to Bay City Clements.
Mooney 16 Delta Romeo, guys, approach Roger, second altimeter 3003.
3003, Mooney 16 Delta Romeo. So somewhere about 4 or 5 months after I upgraded to captain, this airline, another airline that actually was based in Detroit, bought the regional that I was with. So it looked like a good opportunity for me to get to become based in Detroit. Once the two airlines merged, the seniority lists would merge, and then I could bid for a position flying out at the time at the Northwest system, the Northwest Airlines based out of Detroit. Well, things were dilly-dallying over there, and the seniority lists weren't being merged, and they're talking there's going to be another 2 years, 2 to 3 years before that happens.
Golf Hotel, contact Minneapolis Center.
Instead of waiting 2 to 3 years, I decided to jump ship and go apply to one of the other two regional airlines, at the time Mesaba Airlines and Compass Airlines.
Contact.
So I ended up applying, got a job offer at Compass Airlines, which I turned down because I also got a job offer at Mesaba, and it seemed to make more sense at the time to go to Mesaba because Delta and Northwest were merging at the time, and Mesaba, well, Compass and Mesaba both were wholly owned subsidiaries of Northwest Airlines, but Mesaba was going to get 17 more CRJ 900s in addition to the 38 they just got. So they're expanding pretty rapidly, and Compass was hiring the pilots for the last 3 airplanes that they were getting into the fleet. So from a seniority perspective, you know, hiring into the last 3 airplanes versus hiring into towards the beginning of the first of 17 new ones seemed like a much better proposition. So given the seniority system what it was, it made much more sense for me to go to Mesaba. And as it turned out, that was a mistake, but we can talk about that a little bit later. But anyway, so I left my my captain position at my first regional, went to Mesaba to fly CRJ 900, of course because of the seniority system. I went back over into the right seat as a first officer, back to getting paid very little. And I mentioned this in another video. Back then, new hires at a regional airline typically made around $20,000 their first year, and this wasn't like that long ago. I'm not talking like the 50s where, oh, it's a lot of money now. No, it's not. It's probably like $22,000 or $23,000 in today's dollars. Basically, I could have made the same amount at the local McDonald's as I could have flying a regional. But that wasn't that, you know, big deal to me because I was an engineer at that point for 10 years. I knew it was coming. I saved up enough money to kind of make that not that big of a deal. But, you know, it was now I was no longer a captain. I was now one of the most junior first officers sitting in the right seat. Took a big pay cut to do it, but at least I wasn't going to be commuting anymore to bad schedules and spending, you know, all but maybe 1 or 2 nights away from home, which was getting a little bit rough. At least I could, you know, sleep in my own bed. I'd be on reserve, be home most of the day. You know, it wasn't going to be too bad. So training was going well. Everything was great until the day I finished ground school, and Mesaba announces that these 17 CRJ 900s they were supposed to get from Delta for expansion wasn't going to happen. Instead, they were only getting 5, and I was being hired into the class to staff planes 6, 7, and 8. So in other words, the class that I was in, we were already made us overstaffed for the airplanes that we had. So that was all of a sudden kind of a problem because they could have just cut us right then and said, you guys are out of a job, sorry. But at least they didn't do that. They said, you know, we're going to be overstaffed for a little bit. We will, instead of furloughing people, because furloughing people is expensive, what we'll do instead is people can take voluntary leaves of absences for a month and all this other stuff to try and help cut costs. But the problem was I didn't even finish training yet, and I was already on the verge of being furloughed. Instead of, you know, having my, could have been flying as a captain. I did get, you know, spend about a year at Mesaba. I, you know, got a fair amount of time in the CRJ 900. It was fun. It was a very nice airplane. But in the middle of that year, that's the year that the big recession hit. So that was 2008. Then all the major airlines started furloughing pilots. And at that point, Mesaba announced they were going to park, I believe it was 23 of the SOC 340s that they owned. And airlines typically staff at a rate of around 10 pilots per airplane. So the fact that they were parking 23 airplanes basically meant that 230 pilots, plus the 30 that were in my class, 260 pilots were going to get furloughed. So the bottom 260 pilots on the seniority list were going to lose their jobs, and that included me. So that ended up ending my airline career. So I was with Mesaba for exactly 1 year, it was 12 months, and after getting furloughed, I returned back to engineering. that's needed to do something to make some money. That worked out well for me. I enjoyed engineering a lot more my second time around. So when my recall notice came around so I could go back to flying for the airlines, decided to bypass it and just stuck with engineering from that point forward. Now the real pisser of this all is that, remember when I said that the first airline that I flew for got bought by an airline that had a base in Detroit? Well, that airline that bought my first airline also bought Masaba, and not too long after that, they merged all the seniority lists for
Romeo,
the three.
Traffic observed between you and Bay City, change to advisory frequencies approved. That's clock before.
All right, good day, 6 Delta Romeo. So that airline ended up merging all the seniority lists about a year after I got furloughed, which means had I stuck with the first airline that I got hired at, I could have had my Detroit base. I would have been a captain on a CRJ. But instead, when I got recalled, I would have been the most junior first officer in the company, flying right seat in something. God only knows where his base. And that's kind of the rough side of the seniority system. Had I just stuck it out at my first regional, everything would have been great. But you know, you can't predict the future. Sometimes you just have to make the best decisions given the information you have and play the hand you're given. But that's my airline story. Looks like we're getting pretty close to landing. Clemens traffic, Mooney 16 Delta Romeo, extended left, downwind 1A, Clemens. Yeah, I want to talk about a rough seniority story. When I was a captain at my first regional, I was at a hotel in Abilene, Texas, and I wound up having breakfast with this guy. He was an older gentleman, probably in his late 50s. He was also a captain on a Saab for American Eagle. He was a former 747 captain at TWA. And when TWA went out of business, American Airlines scooped up and kind of bought the assets. And when they did the seniority list merge, they did it basically by stapling the TWA guys to the bottom of the American. And since American has their seniority list kind of integrated with the American Eagle regional system, he wound up going to the bottom, near the bottom. So instead of being a captain on a 747 flying international routes for TWA, he was a captain on a Saab 340 just like me. And here I was with right around 2 years worth of airline experience, and he had like 30. And we were doing the same job. Felt bad for the guy. Yeah. Not one of my prettiest, but bumpy, bumpy, bumpy. Let's roll it out to the end. Get off the runway, bird.